I should begin this class by apologizing for today's technical issues that I had with the computer and projector. And because of that, I'm going to be recording today's session for you, and you'll be able to replay it if you need to. So what I want to do is I want to introduce you to grids and what grids are, how we use them, and how we design by them. One of the things that I had mentioned earlier is to date, so far, all you've been doing, the way you've been designing is you've been designing type and relating it to fitting it in relationship to a photograph. But most things that are designed, especially publication designs, are not designed haphazardly, but are typically designed by formatting what's called a grid. And what I have in front of me is an example of the New York Times, a publication. And you should know that the New York Times, well, you do know that the New York Times gets produced on a daily, if not multiple day basis. And the print production of it happens very rapidly. So with the New York Times, like most publications or all publications, what they have is an established page size. So here what I've done is I've shown you the trim size of the document, and that trim size is the edge of the size of the paper. And then what you have is a margin. You have a left margin, you have a right margin, a top margin, and a bottom margin. And these margins are usually implied as to where the content fits between. The projects that you've been working on have consistently asked for margins. Typically what you don't see, and I'm going to teach you how to see, is the underlying grid of a publication like the New York Times. And what I mean by that is if you look at the layout and now look at it when I turn this on, you'll see that I've added some lines to it, some blue lines. And in just a little bit, I'm going to show you how these lines relate to every issue of the New York Times. So what I've done is I've added lines that identify the columns, the column widths, and the space between columns, which is this space here. This space is called a gutter. Now the gutter space and the column width is usually the same for every column, and the gutter width is usually the same for every column as well. So you see that the New York Times, and if I turn off the publication, this is what the New York Times looks like, their grid looks like, without any information on it whatsoever. You'll notice that this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 column grid, but the upper area, this area is called a masthead area, and you'll see how these horizontal line works. And then after you've got this bottom grid, which changes the grid from a 6 column to a 5 column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 column grid. And if I turn on the image where the publication is, you'll see how the grid relates to the way the information is being laid out. Now notice that my grid did not include putting lines in where the photographs are, where the type is, or where photographs end, or where type articles begin. And you'll see why in just a little bit. So I'm going to turn that layout off, and I'm going to turn on another layout, different layout. Look at how the grid is used. So you see that the grid is actually quite flexible. So if you want to have a photograph on 2 columns or 1 column or 4 columns, you can do that, but you still maintain the integrity of the grid. Let me show you another layout. There's another layout there. Now you'll notice on this grid that this column does not adhere to the grid. That was intentional, and I'll tell you typically why. Usually they'll break the rule of the grid to accommodate for the copy that they have. So in this case, they might have said, oh, we don't really want to cut anything from this, so let's cheat and take space from the photo area and let's extend it to the copy area. But this is a rare instance and doesn't happen very often, but it does happen when necessary. You see how the 5-column grid is being used and how the gutter space is being allocated. And then the upper portion, you see how the lines, I'm going to turn it off. You see these lines and how they relate to the baseline and to the area of where things are allocated. Let me go back over here and turn on another layout. And there's another layout where again, you'll notice that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we have an image or a graphic that's taking up all 6 columns and a reallocation of photo spaces. But you see how the grid sets up the parameters for where information and where photographs sit. And